The invasion fleet of Queen Jakor, ruler of the Ulthar Dominion, hovered silently above Earth. From orbit, her ships looked like black daggers against the blue and white of the planet below. The Queen sat on her silver throne inside the royal command ship, her golden eyes fixed on the rotating hologram of Earth. "Primitive," she said softly. Her long claws tapped the arm of her throne. "And yet, noisy." Her advisors, small insect-like creatures, trembled as they approached. "My queen, the humans are active everywhere. They talk, they shout, they run, they seem chaotic." Queen Jakor tilted her head. She had crushed many worlds in her lifetime. But humans were different. They had no central ruler. They had hundreds of languages. They argued with each other. And still they had survived. That alone made her curious. "I will not destroy them," she finally said. "Not yet. I want to see them. I want to understand why they make so much noise." The room went silent. An Ulthar queen never went down to the surface before a war. It was dangerous. It was also, in her people's culture, shameful for a queen to mingle with lesser creatures. But Jakor was not like other queens. She smiled. "Prepare the royal shuttle." A few hours later, a bright flash lit the morning sky of a small human city. People at a large park looked up, squinting against the sun. A silver, bird-shaped craft slowly descended, sending soft waves of wind across the grass. Everyone pulled out their phones to record. At the center of the crowd, a tall human with a whistle around his neck shouted, "All right, people, stay calm. It's probably some government thing." He was Mark Reynolds, the organizer of the city's Mud Challenge Run, an annual obstacle race where humans pushed themselves to the limit, just for fun. The shuttle landed. A ramp extended, and then she stepped out. Queen Jakor was taller than any human. Her 6 long limbs moved with a strange grace. Her black armor shone under the morning sun. Her golden eyes scanned the crowd with calm curiosity. Gasps and whispers spread through the humans. "Whoa. Is that cosplay?" Someone whispered. "Is this part of the event?" Another asked. Mark swallowed hard but forced a friendly smile. Welcome?" The queen did not answer right away. She simply looked at the starting line of the obstacle course. Hundreds of humans were stretching, laughing, and getting ready to run through mud pits, walls, ropes, and other challenges. She raised one sharp brow. These creatures. "Prepare for battle," she asked, her translator glowing softly at her throat. "No," Mark said, blinking. "This is a race. For fun." "For fun?" she repeated slowly, as if tasting a strange word. "They run through danger. They fall, they get hurt. And they call it fun?" Mark chuckled nervously. "Yeah, kinda. It's a challenge." The queen leaned forward, studying a young woman doing push-ups in the mud. She looked at a group of older men laughing as they tied their shoes. She saw teenagers painting their faces with bright colors. No fear, no discipline, no orders, only excitement. It made no sense to her. On Ulthar, pain was for soldiers. Training was for survival. Laughter was for victory, but here, they laughed before the challenge began. Jakor stepped closer, her long legs making a soft clicking sound on the pavement. The humans made a path for her, phone still recording. She turned to Mark. "What happens if they fail?" she asked. "They try again," Mark replied. The queen blinked slowly. "What happens if they are injured?" "Medical tent," Mark said, pointing at a red and white tent nearby. "We help them." Jakor's eyes narrowed. On her world, failure meant disgrace. Here, failure was just another step. As the starting bell rang, the crowd cheered. Hundreds of humans began running. Some fast, some slow. They threw themselves into mud pits, climbed over wooden walls, crawled under ropes. Their faces showed struggle, but also joy. Jakor had seen many battles. She had watched soldiers march in silence. She had listened to the cries of conquered species. But she had never seen anything like this. An army of volunteers racing through pain with smiles on their faces. She walked closer to the course. A young runner slipped and landed face first in the mud. The crowd laughed, not at him, but with him. He got up covered in dirt and raised both hands. The people cheered even louder. "Strange," Jakor whispered. One of her guards approached. "My queen, this is dangerous. We should return to the ship." "No," she said firmly. "I want to understand these creatures. They do not train like soldiers. They do not fear pain. They do not obey, yet they are strong." Her gaze followed a group of runners helping a stranger climb over a wall. They had no reason to help. They were competitors, but they did it anyway. Jakor folded her arms. On Ulthar, strength was personal. Here, it was shared. Mark walked up to her again. You're free to walk around if you want. Just don't scare anyone. Scare? Jakor tilted her head. They are not afraid, he laughed. Yeah, humans are weird like that. Jakor felt something warm inside her chest. Curiosity was not new to her, but this excitement was different. She watched as runners jumped over burning logs and dived into ice-cold water, screaming in both pain and joy. These humans, she said softly, they play with suffering. They call it pushing their limits, Mark replied. She turned to him. Limits are meant to break others, not oneself. Well, Mark grinned. That's kind of the human thing. We break our own limits, before anyone else can. The Queen said nothing, but her golden eyes sparkled. She liked that answer. Meanwhile, on the orbiting flagship, her generals watched the footage with growing panic. She is laughing, one of them hissed. The Queen is laughing. Has she forgotten our mission? Another shouted. This planet is supposed to be conquered, not observed. She will bring us shame, a third whispered. But Jakor did not care. She walked along the obstacle course following the race. She asked questions. She studied human faces. She listened to their shouts, not of war but of encouragement. You got this. Come on, almost there. Don't give up. These words were strange to her ears. On Ulthar, no one encouraged the weak. Here, everyone lifted each other up. Near the end of the course, she found a man sitting on the ground, holding his leg. A human medic was helping him. She crouched down gracefully. You are injured, she said. Yeah, the man winced. Twisted my ankle. Why do you smile? He laughed softly. Because I made it pretty far. I'll try again next year, Jakor stared at him. A warrior on her world would never smile at defeat. Yet this human did. You fell, she said. And you? Celebrate, he nodded. Falling means I tried. That's what matters. For the first time in a long time, Jakor was speechless. The sun moved higher in the sky. One by one, the runners crossed the finish line. Some fell to their knees, exhausted. Some hugged their friends. Some simply lay on the grass, laughing and crying at the same time. There were no medals, no royal ceremonies, just shared joy. Queen Jakor walked back to her shuttle, her black armor now speckled with dust and mud from the crowd brushing past her. Her guards followed, confused and tense. Shall we prepare the invasion, my queen? One asked carefully. Jakor looked at the sky. She thought of her cold palace, her silent soldiers, her endless conquests. Then she thought of the humans shouting for strangers, the man smiling with an injured ankle, and the joy of pushing limits not for power, but for fun. No, she said finally. Not yet, the guard blinked. But why? Because I wish to know more about these creatures, she said, stepping onto the shuttle ramp. They do not fight like us. They do not live like us yet. I feel their strength. She paused, glancing back at the muddy field and the laughing humans. I will not conquer them, she whispered. I will understand them. The engines roared softly, lifting the shuttle into the air. Below, the runners waved at the strange alien queen who had simply watched their race. They didn't know who she was or where she came from. But they smiled at her anyway. Jakor smiled back. She didn't know it yet, but this simple race had already changed her. The night sky above Earth was calm but high in orbit. The royal flagship of Queen Jakor was restless. Inside the great command chamber, her generals argued in low, worried voices. The queen had returned from the surface hours ago, silent and thoughtful. That alone was strange. She had always returned from a scouting mission with sharp orders. Attack, conquer, expand. But tonight, she simply sat in her private chamber, staring at a small holoscreen replaying the human obstacle race. Her advisor, a thin alien named Takira, approached carefully. My queen, the council waits for your decision. Jakor did not answer at first. She watched as a young human in the video slipped into mud, then climbed up again with the help of a stranger. She replayed the moment over and over. Finally, she said quietly, They do not fear falling. Takira tilted her head. My queen? They fall, they fail. They laugh, Jakor continued. On Ulthar, we are taught that failure is shame. But they... She turned to her advisor, golden eyes glowing softly. They have made failure a game. The next morning, Mark Reynolds was setting up another round of the Mud Challenge run for a group of late registrants. He didn't expect to see a silver shuttle land on the same field again. But when it did, and the tall, elegant figure of Queen Jakor stepped out, the crowd gasped once more. She was not in her royal armor this time. She wore a plain black training suit that stretched around her 6 long limbs. Her crown was gone, replaced by a thin silver band on her head. She almost looked casual. Mark walked toward her slowly. Welcome back. You here to watch again? Jakor shook her head. No, today I will run, Mark blinked. Run? You mean like run the race? Yes, she said simply. You said it is fun. The crowd nearby began to cheer. Some clapped. Some shouted, "Let the alien try!" It was meant as a joke, but the Queen nodded seriously. Yes, she said. Let the alien try. The runners gathered at the starting line. People laughed nervously but excitedly. Few ever thought they would be racing next to a tall alien queen with golden eyes. Mark handed her a numbered bib to wear. She stared at it. What is this? She asked. It's your number, Mark explained. Everyone gets one. It means you're part of the race. Part of the race, she repeated slowly. She liked how it sounded. On Ulthar, she was always above the race. Here, she was inside it. She pinned the number on her training suit awkwardly at first. A human teenager stepped forward and offered to help. Jakor let her, surprised at how gentle the human was. On her planet, no one touched the Queen without permission. Here, no one even asked, and somehow it didn't feel wrong. The bell rang. The runners surged forward, and Queen Jakor ran with them. At first, it was easy. Her long legs gave her an advantage. She passed many humans quickly, but soon she reached the first obstacle, a tall wooden wall. She paused. On Ulthar, she could have simply leapt over it with her strength. But she watched how humans approached it. They climbed together, some pushing others up, some pulling from the top. It was messy but joyful. A young man extended a muddy hand toward her. Need a hand, Queen? She stared at the hand, then at the wall. A queen did not accept help. But here, she was not a queen. She was a runner. She took his hand. The crowd roared as the alien queen climbed over the wall like any other competitor. Mud smeared across her dark skin and silver band. She felt alive. The next obstacle was the ice bath. A long trench filled with icy water waited for the runners. Humans screamed as they jumped in, their voices mixing pain and excitement. Jakor stood at the edge, unsure. On her planet, ice water was used to test soldiers' endurance, but never with laughter. No one chose to jump in. Come on, Queen, someone shouted. Don't think. Just do it. Just do it, she repeated quietly. And then without another thought, she jumped in. The freezing water hit her like a shock. She gasped, not in fear, but surprise. Humans were splashing, yelling, cheering each other on. She pushed forward, feeling the cold bite into her skin. It was unpleasant. It was ridiculous. It was wonderful. When she climbed out of the trench, mud dripping from her limbs, she laughed, a clear, ringing sound that startled even her guards watching from the shuttle. On the ropes course, she stumbled for the first time. Her long limbs, strong in battle, were not used to balancing on thin lines. She slipped halfway and fell into the mud below. A gasp went through the crowd. Everyone expected her to be angry. An Ulthar queen would punish anyone who saw her fall. But Jakor lay there for a second and laughed again. The runners nearby reached down to help her up. She accepted their hands, climbed back onto the rope, and tried again. One woman cheered. You got this, Queen. Jakor shouted back. Yes, I got this. For the first time in her long life, she was not leading soldiers or ruling subjects. She was trying, and it felt good. Halfway through the race, she began to slow down. Her alien body was strong, but she was not used to this kind of chaotic movement. Her breathing grew heavy. Mud clung to her arms and face. A group of runners came up behind her. You okay? One asked. I am tired, she admitted. Tired is fine, another said with a grin. That just means you're alive. They didn't leave her behind. They ran next to her, talking, laughing, telling stories. On Ulthar, weakness was hidden. Here it was shared. Jakor looked around. Humans were sweating, stumbling, and still smiling. They pushed each other forward. No one was alone, she whispered to herself. They are strong. Together. Near the final obstacles, a wide pit of mud waited. Runners had to crawl through under low-hanging ropes. She stared at the mess. Back home, a queen would never crawl. A queen would never lower herself, but she dropped to her hands and knees and crawled like the others. Mud coated her face. Someone behind her slipped and accidentally splashed more onto her. Instead of getting angry, she laughed with them. The sound was strange and wild. Her guards on the shuttle stared at the live feed, unable to believe what they were seeing. "Our queen," one whispered. "She is playing." At the final stretch, she could see the finish line. People were shouting her number. "Go, queen, go!" The cheers grew louder as she ran, heart pounding, legs burning. She had fought battles that lasted days, but she had never felt her chest ache with this kind of raw, joyful effort. She crossed the finish line with a loud, triumphant laugh. There was no royal ceremony waiting for her. No golden medal. Only humans clapping, high-fiving, and cheering her name. "Welcome to the club," a man shouted, handing her a small plastic medal. She turned the medal in her hand. It was cheap, light, and unimportant, but somehow it felt more real than any of her royal trophies. Mark approached her, his face covered in mud and sweat, too. "So," he said, "what did you think?" Jakor stood tall, mud dripping from her chin, golden eyes glowing brighter than ever. "I understand now," she said softly. "You humans are not just strange. You are magnificent." The crowd cheered again. Someone started chanting, "Queen! Queen! Queen!" And soon everyone joined in. She raised her arms, laughing with them. The once proud and untouchable Queen of Ulthar now stood covered in mud, laughing with humans like an ordinary runner. Meanwhile, up in orbit, the generals were in full panic. "She is lost," one cried. "She has forgotten the invasion. She is wearing mud," another gasped. Takira, her advisor, watched quietly. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She had never seen the queen so alive. Maybe, she thought, this was not a loss. Maybe it was something greater. As the sun began to set, Jakor sat on the grass with the other runners. The sky above was orange and pink. She listened to their stories of why they ran. "I run because I love the challenge," said one. "I run for my friends," said another. "I run because it reminds me I'm strong," said a third. They spoke simply, without fear. Each reason was different, but the feeling was the same. Pride, joy, connection. Jakor touched the plastic medal again. She thought of her cold palace, the endless conquests, the silence of victory, and then she looked at these humans, messy and loud and warm. She realized something had changed inside her. "I want to do it again," she said suddenly. The humans laughed. "Then come back next week. We'll run together," she nodded. "I will." That night, when she returned to the flagship, the generals begged her to give the invasion order. She stood before them, still wearing traces of mud. "No," she said simply. "We will not invade." The room exploded with shocked cries. "Why, my queen?" they begged. "Because they are not weak," she said. "They are strong in a way we do not understand. They fall and rise again. They laugh at pain. They make joy from struggle. If we fight them, we will not just face their weapons. We will face their spirit." She walked to the window and looked at Earth glowing softly below. "And more than that," she added quietly, "I want to run again." The great warship of Queen Jakor drifted silently above Earth. Inside its shining metal halls, the royal council gathered in fear and confusion. The queen had now visited the planet twice. Both times, instead of giving an invasion order, she had returned with something they could not understand. A smile. "She is changing," one general whispered. "She is forgetting who she is," another added. Takira, her advisor, stood quietly at the back. She didn't think the queen was forgetting. She thought the queen was finally living. When Jakor entered the chamber, everyone fell silent. She was not wearing her golden crown. She was not wearing royal armor. Instead, she wore the black training suit from the race, still slightly stained with Earth's mud. Her steps were firm but calm. Her golden eyes no longer looked cold. They looked alive. "My queen," one general began nervously. "The invasion fleet is ready. We await your command." Jakor looked at the giant screen showing Earth below. For a long time she said nothing. Then softly but clearly she said, "There will be no invasion." The council gasped. One general almost dropped his staff. "But why?" Jakor turned to face them. "Because I have seen their strength. Not in their weapons, not in their armies, in them." She paused, remembering the humans helping each other over the wall, the laughter in the mud, the way no one gave up. "They are not a threat to be crushed," she continued. "They are a fire that cannot be put out." Back on Earth, in the same muddy field where it all began, Mark Reynolds and his team were busy setting up the biggest event of the year, the Ultimate Challenge. Word had spread around the world that an alien queen had joined a race. It became news. It became a legend. People from many countries came to join the event. The field was full of tents, food stalls, cameras, and excited voices. Everyone hoped the mysterious alien would come again. "She'll come," Mark said to his assistant with a grin. "I can feel it." And then, like a promise answered, a silver shuttle appeared in the sky. The crowd cheered as Jacor stepped out. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her were dozens of tall alien soldiers, her royal guard, also dressed in plain training suits. The humans burst into laughter and applause. The aliens looked uncomfortable but curious. Mark walked forward with a big smile. "Welcome back, Queen." She tilted her head slightly. "I am not here as a queen today," she said. "I am here as a runner." The crowd roared even louder. At the starting line, Jacor looked around. Humans of all ages and shapes were preparing for the race. Some wore costumes. Some painted their faces. Others held hands with friends. One little girl stood near the front, staring up at her with wide eyes. Jacor knelt down slowly. "Are you racing too?" she asked. The girl nodded shyly. "Yes, are you afraid?" "A little." Jacor smiled gently. "Good. That means you are ready. Fear means you care, and if you care, you will be strong." The girl's face lit up with courage. She gave a small nod. Jacor stood again, taller than everyone else, but somehow no longer distant. She felt like part of them. The starting bell rang. Thousands of feet hit the ground. Mud splashed. People shouted, laughed, and cheered. Jacor ran with her alien guards beside her, their long strides powerful and fast. But soon something happened that none of them expected. The alien guards began to smile. They had been trained for war, for cold discipline. But here, surrounded by laughing humans, they felt something new. When one of them slipped into a puddle, the crowd around didn't mock him. They pulled him up, patted his back, and shouted encouragement. Another guard fell behind, tired, and a group of humans slowed down to keep pace with him. They talked to him, cheered him on, and made jokes. The alien, confused at first, slowly started laughing. Meanwhile, Jacor faced the rope wall again. She could have jumped over it with her strength, but she didn't. She climbed it with the humans. When she reached the top, she turned and extended her hand, not to a soldier, but to a human woman struggling below. "Come," Jacor said. The woman grabbed her hand, and together they climbed over the wall. When they landed on the other side, both were covered in mud. The woman laughed. Jacor laughed with her, and everyone around them cheered. She wasn't leading an army anymore. She was part of a team. The ice trench came next. The water was colder than before, but Jacor jumped in without hesitation. She didn't shiver. She shouted, not in pain but with joy. Her guards followed her lead. The humans screamed and laughed. The aliens, at first stiff and serious, slowly started yelling too. Somewhere between the mud and the cold water, the Ulthar guards forgot they were soldiers. They became runners. Halfway through the race, a human teenager twisted his ankle. He fell to the ground, biting his lip. Jacor saw him and ran over. She knelt beside him, just like the humans had done for her during her first race. "Can you stand?" she asked. "Maybe," he said, his voice shaking. She offered her arm. "Then lean on me." The crowd watched as the mighty alien queen carried the boy step by step until they reached the medical tent. When she returned to the course, the humans cheered her name louder than ever. Near the end of the course, the mud crawl waited. Jacor and her alien guards got down on their hands and knees again. This time they didn't hesitate. They crawled through the mud like everyone else. A human slipped and splashed her, covering her face completely. The entire group burst into laughter, including her. Mud covered her golden eyes, her silver band, her royal posture. But in that moment, she didn't feel like a queen at all. She felt like one of them. At the final stretch, the finish line was bright and loud. Humans and aliens ran side by side. Jacor could hear the little girl from earlier running behind her. She slowed down, turned around, and offered her hand. "Come," she said again. The girl grabbed her hand. Together they crossed the finish line as the crowd exploded into cheers. It was not about who came first. It was about finishing together. Jacor raised the girl's hand high in the air. "Victory," she said simply. The crowd chanted, "I queen! Queen, queen!" But this time it didn't sound like they were talking to a ruler. It sounded like they were talking to a friend. That night, a great celebration took place in the park. Humans and aliens sat together on the grass, eating, talking, laughing. There were no titles, no armies, no orders, just people. Mark raised a drink in the air. "To the queen who runs like one of us!" The crowd cheered. Jakor, sitting with mud still on her arms, raised her cup too. "To the humans," she said, "who taught me how to fall and rise." Up in orbit, the Ulthar Council watched the live broadcast. They saw their queen crawling in mud, laughing with humans carrying an injured boy. Some were shocked, some were angry, but slowly a new thought began to spread. Maybe strength was not only about conquering others. Maybe strength was also about belonging. Weeks passed. What started as one race became a movement. Humans and aliens began hosting joint events. Mud runs on Earth, endurance games on Ulthar. Soldiers trained not just with weapons, but with laughter. Queens and generals learned to run side by side with ordinary people. Jakor became a symbol across both worlds, not as a conqueror, but as a bridge between species. Children on Ulthar played mud race instead of war battle. Humans painted alien flags next to their own at events. And for the first time in history, two very different worlds understood each other without fighting. One quiet evening, Jakor stood at the edge of the training field on Ulthar. The ground was covered with mud. Human and alien children raced each other, falling and laughing. She watched them with a small smile. Takira walked up beside her. "My queen," she said softly, "our people have changed." "No," Jakor replied. "They have grown." She thought of the first day she had watched the race. The confusion, the curiosity, and now, this. "Do you regret not invading them?" Takira asked. Jakor turned to look at her, golden eyes shining warmly. "Regret?" She laughed. "No, I thank them. They taught me that strength does not always wear armor." Later, during a special event on Earth, Mark presented Jakor with a new medal. It wasn't gold or expensive, just a simple piece of shaped metal with the words "Honorary Human" engraved on it. She held it tightly. She had won many trophies before, trophies from conquered worlds. But this one meant more. "Thank you," she said. "No," Mark grinned. "Thank you." As night fell, she stood with Mark at the finish line, looking at the stars. Her fleet was still in orbit, but it was no longer a weapon. It was a bridge. "Funny," Mark said with a smile. "We thought we were the weak ones." Jakor shook her head slowly. "No, you were strong all along. You just didn't need war to prove it." The legend of the queen who ran spread across galaxies. Other species visited Earth not to fight, but to run, laugh, and learn. What started with one race became a new way of seeing strength, and whenever someone fell, whether human or alien, there was always a hand waiting to pull them back up. In the end, Jakor stood at the starting line once more, surrounded by humans and aliens. She wasn't a conqueror anymore. She was a runner, a friend, a leader of a different kind. As the bell rang, she whispered to herself, "This is fun," and she ran.